In this extensive conversation, Joe Rogan and Bret Weinstein delve into a wide spectrum of topics centered around evolutionary biology, the COVID-19 pandemic, vaccine controversies, societal shifts, and political dynamics. They explore cutting-edge ideas in evolution, dissect the scientific and political mishandlings during the pandemic, analyze cultural transformations around sex and relationships, and reflect on contemporary challenges of free speech and institutional trust. Bret Weinstein introduces a compelling hypothesis that challenges the traditional Darwinian view of evolution based solely on random mutations altering protein-coding genes. While he affirms the classical model's validity at small scales, such as pigment changes, he argues it falls short in explaining major morphological transitions, like the bat wing's evolution from a shrew-like foot. Drawing on the interdisciplinary field of evo-devo, evolution of development, he suggests an additional potent layer exists within genomes, the storage of variables as integers, exemplified by structures like telomeres. These variable number tandem repeats, VNTRs, and microsatellites, often dismissed as junk DNA, could act as genomic parameters that influence developmental timing and morphological features. This variable storage system, invisible to classical triplet codon analysis, could greatly enhance evolution's ability to explore the adjacent possible, the set of phenotypes closely related to current forms, enabling rapid and nuanced morphological innovation without the slow accumulation of single protein mutations. Weinstein contrasts the stasis of fields like classical evolutionary biology, which has remained largely unchanged since the 1970s, with the more vibrant evo-devo approach emerging from developmental biology. He likens this additional evolutionary toolkit to programming languages above raw binary, analogous to how higher-level languages increase computing power beyond machine code. This expanded framework maintains Darwinian principles but vastly increases evolvability and adaptive potential. Building on his evolutionary discussion, Weinstein and Rogan tackle the question of how complex adaptations like powered flight evolve. Referencing real-life examples such as flying squirrels, which glide silently through forests by harnessing stored potential energy from climbing trees, Weinstein sketches a plausible evolutionary pathway. Gradual structural changes like slight webbing between digits would provide incremental competitive advantages, enabling a transition from terrestrial locomotion to gliding and eventually to true powered flight. This transition illustrates natural selection, not only discovering useful forms, but discovering better ways to explore morphological possibilities, a process he calls explorer modes. The approach recognizes that evolution is a dynamic, learning system, improving its capacity to navigate phenotype space, which contrasts with a strictly random mutation model. Flight opens up new ecological niches, leading to adaptive radiation and diversification, as seen in the approximately 11,000 bird species and numerous bat species. Weinstein extends the evolutionary metaphor to human cultural evolution. He argues that human culture is an evolved system, enabling rapid learning and adaptation well beyond genetic change, facilitated by collective intelligence and symbolic communication. The ability to exchange abstract ideas like this podcast's very conversation over distance and time constitutes a form of evolution in its own right, turbocharging biological evolution. This cultural toolkit allows rapid social problem-solving and innovation, forming a powerful method of parallel processing by multiple minds. It represents a second evolutionary domain beyond genes, one that shapes human development and societal progress exponentially faster than biological mutation and selection. The discussion shifts to the fast-paced technological and social changes currently reshaping human life. Weinstein warns that humans face hypernovelty, a state where the rate of change in environment, technology, and social norms exceeds our capacity to adapt effectively. He highlights concerns about endocrine-disrupting chemicals, such as microplastics and phthalates, which contribute to alarming declines in male fertility and increased miscarriage rates, evidencing deep biological stress on human populations. Culturally, the breakdown of traditional sexual and social structures, exacerbated by birth control, the sexual revolution, and shifting gender ideologies, has eroded the central organizing principle of civilization, rooted in reproductive biology and structured human relationships. This fracturing threatens social coherence and individual well-being, especially when compounded by rapid technological disruptions like AI and social media. Rogan and Weinstein emphasize the importance of rites of passage in marking the transition from youth to adulthood, offering clear social cues and responsibilities. The modern lack of meaningful rites and a dissonance between expectations and reality contribute to widespread young adult confusion, anxiety, and a lack of purpose. The erosion of consequences due to welfare systems and overprotection fosters an infantilized adult population incapable of self-regulation. They critique educational institutions for perpetuating ideological dogmas disconnected from real-world adult responsibilities, and caution against the expanding concept of universal basic income, which might inadvertently foster dependency without clear purpose or motivation for individuals. The conversation turns toward the intricate and delicate dynamics of male-female relationships. Weinstein and Rogan critique current cultural narratives that equate liberation with adopting male behaviors at their worst, such as casual sex and emotional detachment. Pornography and sex robots exacerbate these trends by distorting young people's sexual development and expectations, undermining meaningful long-term relationships essential to family and societal stability. They discuss evolutionary biology's insight that human sexuality is inherently tied to relationship bonding, social status, and long-term reproductive investment. Disruption of these patterns has profound implications for civilization's functioning. The ongoing cultural experiment of loosening traditional sexual mores and mixing it with rapid technological change makes the future of relationships uncertain. Weinstein and Rogan provide a detailed analysis of the COVID-19 pandemic response, focusing extensively on vaccine safety concerns and the politicization of repurposed drugs like Ivermectin. They highlight alarming data suggesting vaccine injuries, including myocarditis and fatalities, especially in children, which have been systematically downplayed or concealed by institutions and media. Weinstein praises recent FDA memoranda acknowledging vaccine-related deaths among children as a positive, albeit overdue sign of transparency. They discuss the extensive propaganda and financial incentives that drove vaccination campaigns despite growing evidence of harm. The suppression of ivermectin, a widely available, safe, and effective repurposed drug, is portrayed as symptomatic of deeper systemic dysfunction. Randomized control trials were manipulated or buried to discredit it, as revealed through an accidental natural experiment where courts ordered its use, resulting in significantly improved survival. Their critique extends to the medical establishment's inertia, institutional capture by pharmaceutical interests, and censorship that undermined rational public discourse during the crisis. They also note the critical role of alternative media and platforms like Joe Rogan's podcast in breaking through official narratives. The dialogue reveals a profound distrust of government agencies, medical authorities, and mainstream media due to repeated misinformation, financial conflicts of interest, and censorship during the pandemic. The duo discusses the manipulation of statistical methods, biased clinical trials, and the game of pharma, where commercial interests trump scientific rigor and public health. They reflect on the difficulty of correcting misinformation once institutional power cloaks it in complexity and official status. The conversation underscores the need for simpler, transparent studies that can withstand public scrutiny and stresses the importance of intellectual humility and admitting errors in the pursuit of truth. The conversation broadens to discuss threats to free speech, citing the Twitter files revelations and governmental intelligence agency interference in public discourse. The duo warns of the dangers posed by central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, programmable money that could facilitate unprecedented levels of social and political control, including medical tyranny. They speculate about how financial collapse and digital currency adoption might enable suppression of dissenting voices and enforce conformity. They examine worsening political repression, particularly in the UK, where removal of jury trials and criminalization of refusal to use preferred gender pronouns reflect a slide toward authoritarianism. They express concerns about broader societal fragility in the face of censorship, digital surveillance, and loss of constitutional protections. Finally, Weinstein and Rogan touch on political corruption surrounding the Biden family, particularly referencing Hunter Biden's controversies and pardons involving Anthony Fauci that raise questions about accountability. They critique Sam Harris's dismissive stance on these issues, expressing disappointment at the intellectual failing in denying the interconnectedness of these political scandals, which have profound implications for governance and public trust. They reflect skeptically on the motives behind pandemic management and the use of emergency powers, suggesting a coordinated effort to impose new regimes of control under the guise of crisis management. Throughout the conversation, the strained relationship with Sam Harris is reviewed. Weinstein and Rogan recount their disagreements with Harris over pandemic responses, mask efficacy, vaccine safety, and public health policy, and criticize his refusal to acknowledge errors despite mounting evidence. They observe how Harris's credibility has eroded among former supporters due to rigid adherence to flawed narratives and his antagonistic posture toward dissenting voices like Weinstein's. They emphasize the importance of intellectual humility and openness to correction, noting that Harris's approach has hindered constructive dialogue and fueled polarization. The contrast between their own investigative, questioning approach and Harris's dogmatism epitomizes broader challenges in public discourse today.